There's not much to do when all I can is thinking about you. Not doing well, don't know where you are, 'cause you're not here. It's been way too long.
As many of you know, part of our Graveyard Explorers team is two dogs, Rudy and Moomin, and we decided to take them for a walk along the river one day. We were just walking along and we noticed what looked like a old moated house or manor. Further down we noticed that there was a sign explaining that that was exactly what it was. We did a bit of research, and in fact we were walking through the medieval lost village of Santon, and we didn't even realise. So of course I whipped out my phone and started filming, came home, did a bit of research, and the Doomsday Book tells us that in 1086 the village had around 30 residents, but by the 1650s it had shrunk to just one. Now you need to remember this one person. It is believed that the plague contributed to the decline of the village, but it wasn't all to do with the plague. This village is in the Brecks and they are notoriously sandy, and between the year 1665 and 1670 sandstorms hit, and it is thought that a warren 5 miles away was broken up by winds, and the winds then carried all that sand to Santon and the village was just slowly covered. This is a quote I found from one of the eyewitnesses that used to live in Santon. I'll let you just read that. So I'm too lazy to read it out. And because of these sandstorms, then the village's fate was pretty much sealed. So we went further down and we came to this lovely little church. Now this is supposed to be one of England's smaller churches. It was built around 1628 on the site of the medieval church, which I assume was the Santon church. It then went into decline because there weren't enough parishioners there. The one parishioner that I told you to remember that was left in 1650? Yeah, his name was Thomas Bancroft. Now, Thomas rebuilt the church in the 1700s. The church is now redundant and is looked after a group of locals. I had the pleasure of meeting one of them, and the graveyard and the church is beautifully maintained by these people, and they do it for no money, and they do it in their own time and they don't get paid to do so. In 1858, Reverend William Poley funded the building of the chancel, so the church was a lot smaller than it was now. The North Church and Porch and Tower. We'll visit his grave next, beside the churchyard to the east of the chancel. It is massive. It looks a bit out of place, really. It sort of dominates the whole graveyard. But the other side of this church has a nearby stream, and there was another church there. That was called St Helens, and it has been disappeared for years. And this little church is often mistakenly called St Helens, but this one is not. This is All Saints. Now, the gentleman I spoke to, excuse the dogs if you can hear them in the background, the gentleman I spoke to in the graveyard, he was really helpful, and he told me about some of the graves in there and who they were, and it was amazing. We'll get into that a bit further along. If you look to the back on the tiled altar there's the fleur de lis on the tiles. That it could be quite significant later on. The top of this window has the Lamb of God depicted on it. I don't know why I didn't zoom in on it, but I didn't. But look at this roof. This is an Italian-inspired chapel roof. The name I mentioned earlier was Thomas Bancroft. Now, Thomas was a tax collector. He is buried here in the main aisle. There's an interesting story about Mr. Bancroft. It is alleged that he was a Freemason of a very high ranking. And it is alleged that there are strong Masonic connections to this building, but they are all circumstantial. The church-inspired roof at the top we see is rumoured to be of a Knights Templar influence, and the Lamb of God symbol is reported to have links to the Masons and to the Knights Templar. The fleur-de-lis I mentioned is an emblem of royalty, power and honour, and also has strong Masonic connections. Its connection to Freemasonry has connections to the Knights Templar. The Freemasonry denies the fleur-de-lis connection and says it's just a symbol of Christianity and nothing more. I don't really know too much about the Freemasons, to be honest. I have met a couple in a previous job I did, but no, I don't really know, so I can't say whether it is or not. But with Bancroft's connection, all the little symbols dotted about, is this church in the middle of nowhere rebuilt by a Freemason in a parish with very little parishioners linked to the Freemasons and the Knights Templar? As I said, I have no idea. Let me know what you think in the comments. So before we exit to the graveyard, another little random fact for you. One of the TV show for Dad's Army was filmed here. Random. So as we come out to the graveyard, I stopped and chatted to a gentleman that was doing some works here, and he was very informative and gave me a lot of information about the people who were buried here. Now, this little boy died when he was only 9 years old. Samuel lived in the farmhouse over the road from this little church, and it is reported that his parents could see his grave from their window. Not farmhouse, railway house. There used to be a lot of railway houses here, and so they used to be able to see him from the window. The gentleman I spoke to said sadly that this is a grave of the young. This gentleman here, George Frederick Brown, was only 21 years when he passed. He was a planer apparently. I don't know what that is. I'm assuming it's something to do with carpentry. Excuse the dogs if you can hear them. And the one behind them is another child's grave, and you can see the one next to it, that's also a child's grave. This one is Marjorie Lockwood, twin daughters of William and Belinda Lockwood. I believe she was only 5 years old when she died. And as you can see from her tombstone now sort of going down, her nickname was Mardy. And then sadly, her twin sister died, aged 18. The one next to it, this was tiny in real life. It looks quite big on camera, but I believe she was about 2 years old when they died. Now the grave now coming up, I learnt something new on it actually. So if you look, the ground is still raised like it was hadn't been buried long. Now it is believed that this gentleman was a gentleman of money, and that's because the raise in the ground is where the coffin hasn't deteriorated. So depending on the type of wood that your coffin is, usually after so many months or years, the coffin rots. But if you've got really good solid oak wood, the coffin doesn't rot, and that's what's happened here. The ground is still as high as it was when the day he was buried. You can see the sort of rise in the ground here. That was really fascinating, because normally they sink in and then the graveyard attendants come and fill them in, but it hasn't happened there. That sort of shows that the man had some wealth, as he could afford a strong wooden box. As I mentioned earlier, this is the rather large, flamboyant grave marker of the Reverend. I don't know why I only filmed one side of the grave, but I did. Sorry about that. No, the gardener told me that this was the oldest gravestone in the cemetery. I can't for the life of me remember what age it was, but he said that this one is the oldest. He also said he'd been doing this for years, and he felt that he had some connection to the people that were in here, which I thought was lovely. And I think it's lovely that these people do this and maintain this church using their own time and money.
And I know that you're right, but you should know it. You've been gone for way too long now. If I could lay down beside you, I would. When nothing really matters, that's all I wanna do. I hope that you are safe and that I will see you soon. If I could lay down beside you, I would. Even if you're gone, I won't forget you. You're all I know, what I need, and that ain't changed.